Welcome to the introduction to business analytics. Business analytics is a topic that has been on the minds of many people, from CEOs all the way to pastors, all the way down to people that are just wanting to learn how to win a game of Monopoly. Business analytics is all about taking data and making sense of it. So we're going to talk about it and go on a journey of understanding how we collect data, create data, and make sense of it. There are three major developments that have occurred that have allowed business analytics to become top of mind with people. The first one has to do with technology. If you think about Facebook and Instagram, and you think about all of these wonderful social networks that we play with on our cell phones, each of those interactions is creating data that is now being used to understand how we actually interact with those devices. Another thing that has occurred as a development that has furthered business analytics as a topic of study is the ongoing research around collecting data in and of itself. In collecting data, we have new computers with more computing power in our wristwatches than we had just a few years ago that would take up an entire room. So by having computing technology and more power, we're able to crunch data faster and make sense of it quicker and be able to act on it quicker. Now, if you take the computing power and then you take the creation of data through all of these wonderful sources that we now have, now you've got a combustion of innovation that is there, which we now have termed business analytics. How do we now look at all of this data that's being created, capture it, and make sure it makes sense unto us? One of the main reasons that we want to look at business analytics is the ability to help us make better decisions. Managers look at data all the time, and they leverage it to make decisions in their organizations. That's what we're going to do with business analytics. But we have to make sure we understand where the data comes from, how it's being presented to us, and what insights we can gain from it. More of your strategic decisions, how a company should enter a market, what customers it should interact with, what should it do to develop its financial structure and capital position. All of those things are things that data can help you decide. So from a strategic standpoint, it's very important to take on business analytics as a space you want to get good at. There are also some tactical decisions that you can make. How many products are you going to make this week? Who should you schedule on your line in order to make those products? What customers should you call this week? Just make sure that you have appointments so you can go see them. Those are some decisions you can use business analytics to help you make as well. Because if you're capturing the right data, it will give you the insights, through some processing, of course, in order to make the right decisions. Now, when I think about the decision-making process, there are several steps there. One is to identify and define the problem you're trying to solve. The second is to determine the criteria that will be used to evaluate alternative solutions. Determining the set of alternative solutions is also the next step, and then evaluating those alternatives and then choosing an alternative. We do this all the time. I know whenever I go to the grocery store, I start with defining the problem. Usually I'm hungry. The second thing is, what criteria am I going to use to evaluate what I'm going to buy at the grocery store? Usually that criteria includes slipping something into the cart that my wife doesn't want me to have, and I'm making sure that she's not seeing. So that's probably some criteria I would use. And then once I do that, I evaluate all the alternatives, and that usually happens at the checkout. And then once we have the checkout, she usually finds everything that I put in there that shouldn't have been in there in the first place, and then we end up choosing the right alternatives, things like carrots, broccoli, the healthy stuff. Here are some common approaches to making decisions. The first approach is tradition. When you make a decision based on tradition, you're basing your decision off of a situation you have some experience with. You've seen it multiple times. Usually it has the same type of parameters, the same scenario. So usually your decision making is fairly easy if you want to have the same outcome. The next approach is intuition. Intuition has to do with your experience and what we would call going with your gut. So you may not see all the data, you may not see what's there that can give you a solid answer. However, there's something pulling at you that says you should go a certain way or do a certain thing. We call that intuition. Rules of thumb is an approach. In other words, if there are some guidelines that you usually follow to make a certain decision when you're presented a certain case or a certain scenario, usually follow those guidelines. And those are called rules of thumb. And last is to use relevant data that's available. So you may not have all the data that you need to make a decision, but you can leverage some of that data to make the most informed decision that you possibly can. Now let's really define business analytics. The definition that I have is it's a scientific process of transforming data into insight for making better decisions. Another definition is it's used for data-driven or fact-based decision-making, which is often seen as more objective than other alternatives for decision-making. In other words, it's data-focused, data-driven decision-making. So it's a process that helps you transform information that you collect into something you can use to actually make a decision on the scenario that you're faced with. The tools that business analytics can help you make decisions with are these. It can help you by creating insights. It can improve your ability to accurately forecast for planning. It can help you quantify risk. And it also can yield better alternatives through analysis and optimization. Now, there are several analytical methods that you can use and models you can use as a part of business analytics. One we're going to talk about later is descriptive analytics, which comes from using descriptive statistics. Now, when we talk about descriptive analytics, we use things like data queries, we use reports, we use descriptive statistics, which I just mentioned, data visualization, which we're going to talk a little bit about, data mining techniques, and basic what-if spreadsheet models. So we're going to get into several of these throughout this course. One of the reasons we like business analytics in a corporate setting, or really any setting, is that it helps us create this tool called a dashboard. Now, a dashboard is simply a collection of charts, tables, maps, and summary statistics that can help you understand where you are and give you a picture of what's going on. Some of the uses for dashboards are you can help managers make specific decisions about company things that are going on as far as what you should produce from a manufacturing standpoint, what you should sell to certain customers, and how your employees are doing from an HR standpoint. Corporate level managers use dashboards to summarize things like sales by region, current inventory levels, company-wide metrics. Pastors in churches use data to summarize how many people are coming to services, how much is being collected for offerings and things of that nature to support a church, and how many people are being affected by outreach ministries. Another form of analytics is predictive analytics. Predictive analytics helps you understand what's about to happen by using some of the data that you have collected. It's a way to forecast potential outcomes in a scientific way so that you can apply resources based on the decision you want to make to go in that direction. Survey data and past purchase behavior may be used to help predict the market share of a new product. So you use predictive analytics in order to help you figure out what product you should put into the market. There are several optimization models that we'll get into as we talk about business analytics. One is a portfolio model, which basically, if you think about a 401k or an investment, it may have several securities or several investments that you want to watch, and the performance of all of them together allow you to have a portfolio view, so that's something you can look at. Another one could be a supply network design model. In that example of an optimization model, what you're trying to do is optimize the supply chain through an entire company's connection from its suppliers to itself down to its customers. And then another example of an optimization model is a pricing markdown model. Everybody loves a sale, and everybody loves to buy products less than what they would normally purchase them for. So companies would like to track and understand when they discount products, what behavior are they incentivizing in the market. We've heard of this term big data, and what's funny to me is data has always been big. It just depends on how much you collect. But since people like the term big data, we might as well talk about it. It is a set of data that cannot be managed, processed, or analyzed with commonly available software in a reasonable amount of time. Now, think about the data it took to put the man or the men on the moon. All the data it took to figure out how to get a rocket out of Earth's orbit, how to get it all the way to the moon, which is millions and millions of miles away, and to get them back. Think about all of that, and think about the computing power they had at the time to do that. When you put those together, it gives you a sense of how important analytics is and the great feat that it was for them to be able to put a man on the moon. They used a lot of big data and a lot of techniques at the time to figure out how to make that work. And we're still doing it today. If you think about Facebook, for example, which has 2 billion users, imagine 2 billion users all at the same time posting pictures, writing posts, friending people, unfriending people. All of those transactions are captured somewhere, and Facebook has to use it in order to understand the customer experience. So it has to have enormous computing power to figure that out. Figure 1.2 gives you a spectrum of business analytics. It goes from standard reporting all the way to optimization. And with all of these different levels of business analytics, there are different places where you will see them, from prescriptive analytics to predictive analytics to descriptive. In practice, here are a couple of examples to make sure you understand where it can be applied. From a financial standpoint, you can use predictive models in order to forecast future financial performance, assess the risks of investment portfolios, and construct financial instruments such as derivatives. In the human resources space, you can use analytics to figure out the mix of skill sets that your employees have and what's necessary to reach your goals. You can figure out if you're hiring the highest quality talent and provide an environment that will retain that talent. And also, if you're trying to track diversity goals and inclusion goals, analytics will help you with that. In marketing, analytics is very core to being successful. With all the social media things that we talk about, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or the ads that are placed on these different platforms, people in marketing want to know how many impressions that customers are seeing as they interact with your content, and if that content is being effective from the standpoint of putting out great calls to action and getting customers to actually buy something or do something or interact with you. So analytics is core to having a successful marketing function. Healthcare analytics is a big deal. One of the things you use healthcare analytics to do is to improve patient, staff, and facility scheduling, to improve patient flow. Purchasing is something we monitor with analytics, and also inventory control. So if we look back and we look at things that may have happened in 2020 as it relates to the pandemic, analytics could be used to help us, and was used to help us, be able to navigate that pandemic as best as we possibly could. Analytics also shows up in the supply chain. Think about companies like FedEx and UPS and moving packages across the world. There's so much data that's created in that process. Those companies rely on it to make sure they're efficient and effective in getting packages from destination to destination. Companies benefit from the ability to see supply chain analytics and information that gives them insight on how to make those routes, how to make the processes and the things that enable those packages to travel the way they do better. Another place analytics gives us great insight is in the world of sports. I know there's some fantasy football people out there. There's some people that enjoy other sports like baseball and soccer, and they follow the stats of the players religiously. So analytics is great to determine if you've got a great team, if you've got great players, and what makes them Hall of Famers down the road. So following the data that comes out of sports and the performances of the athletes is a cool thing to see how really good they are. And last but not least, there's web analytics. We're on the internet all the time. We're going to websites. We're interacting with websites. We're buying things from websites. So companies that own them and own e-commerce engines that sell product to customers are interested in analytics because it helps them understand how to best position their products, how to make sure they have a good customer experience, and also how they can present themselves so that people can easily find them. And that is an introduction to business analytics.